In recent weeks, global media, analytical centers, and intelligence structures have been recording a new flashpoint that could fundamentally change the geopolitical balance in the Western Hemisphere. Against the backdrop of rising tensions around Venezuela, where American warships have effectively begun a blockade under the pretext of fighting drug cartels, China and Russia have taken an unprecedented step. According to sources in the Financial Times as well as analysts from Nikkei Asia, an official invitation is being prepared for Venezuela to join BRICS not as an observer or partner, but as a full member. This move has not only an economic but also a military dimension. In this way, Russia and China are creating a legal basis for the presence of their naval forces in the Caribbean, formally justifying it as the defense of an ally in the bloc. Washington in recent weeks has intensified the operation known as Sea Shield, presenting it as a fight against drug trafficking, but in Caracas and Beijing it is called nothing less than a hidden blockade. According to Reuters, just a few days ago, American intelligence tracked the movement of Chinese warships only a couple of days away from Venezuela's coast. In Caracas, President Nicolas Maduro publicly declared that these ships are a support fleet that will arrive in the event of further U.S. pressure. Russian sources also do not hide that they are considering the scenario of permanent military presence covered by the diplomatic formula of protecting a BRICS partner. For Moscow, this is also an opportunity to break through strategic isolation and return to a region traditionally considered a U.S. sphere of influence. Beijing, however, is acting with much more caution. According to the South China Morning Post, there is no consensus in Chinese military circles about a direct confrontation with the U.S. Navy. Chinese admirals understand perfectly well that despite the massive naval buildup, a clash against the most powerful army in the world could lead to unpredictable consequences. But at the same time, Beijing sees an opportunity to use Venezuela as a foothold to increase geopolitical pressure. As analysts at the Carnegie Endowment note, the formula is simple. We are not fighting the United States, we are defending our BRICS partner. This is a legal and political insurance policy that allows China to demonstrate strength while avoiding accusations of aggression. For Donald Trump, who is once again trying to build his strategy on the slogans of America First and the demonstration of force, this situation is becoming extremely risky. According to Bloomberg, within the White House, there are fears that Venezuela's formal entry into BRICS would automatically turn any military incident in the regional conflict into a framework of global confrontation. That means the United States risks being drawn into a conflict not only with Caracas, but also with Moscow and Beijing at the same time. This would be the worst scenario for Washington in recent decades because it undermines the very foundation of the American Monroe Doctrine. In parallel, information pressure is growing. Chinese state media are actively broadcasting footage of their ships passing through the Atlantic, presenting it as support for international order and the right of peoples to independence. Russian television channels emphasize that America is violating Venezuela's sovereignty under a fabricated pretext, and therefore, the international community must support Caracas. In Latin America, this discourse finds resonance. According to El País, several countries in the region, including Bolivia and Nicaragua, have expressed support for Venezuela's possible entry into BRICS. For them, it is a chance to weaken Washington's economic and political pressure. In the West, alarm is rising. In analytical reports by Rand Corporation, it is stated directly that the presence of the Chinese fleet off the coast of Venezuela could become a precedent for future military consolidation of China in the Western Hemisphere. Russia, according to experts, sees the situation as an opportunity to regain positions lost after the Cold War, and at the same time to demonstrate that sanctions have not been able to weaken its global ambitions. It is no coincidence that in Moscow proposals are already being voiced about expanding military cooperation with Caracas, including the possible deployment of air defense systems and joint exercises. Meanwhile, in the United States, pressure on Trump is growing from Congress. According to Politico, Democrats are demanding that the White House avoid direct confrontation, while Republicans, on the contrary, insist on a tough response. The situation is aggravated by internal problems, rising energy prices, protests in ports due to disruptions in oil supplies, and pressure from farmers affected by China's retaliatory sanctions. In this environment, any step toward escalation could turn into a political crisis within the United States itself. Venezuela, however, seems ready to seize the moment. According to The Guardian, Maduro has already agreed with Moscow and Beijing on a plan for accelerated entry into BRICS. For Caracas, this is not only a diplomatic victory, but also a chance to secure the status of an untouchable player covered by two nuclear powers. In this logic, even the potential threat of an American strike looks less likely. Washington understands that this is no longer only about Venezuela. Thus, we are witnessing a rare historical turning point. If Venezuela really joins BRICS, it will become the first country in the Western Hemisphere officially integrated into the anti-American bloc. This will not only change the map of international alliances, but also call into question the very principle of U.S. global leadership. China and Russia are acting cautiously, but extremely deliberately, turning a local crisis into a tool of pressure on the entire Washington order. For the first time in many decades, the United States is facing the threat of losing exclusive control over its own backyard. An additional factor that makes this situation particularly dangerous is the reaction of other Latin American countries. As noted by Latin America Post, Brazil and Argentina are closely monitoring the moves of Moscow and Beijing. Brazil, being a key member of BRICS, received information about the possible expansion of the bloc even before public statements, and heated debates have begun inside Lula da Silva's government. India, as noted by Hindustan Times, is taking a more restrained position. New Delhi fears that turning BRICS into an overtly military bloc could weaken its own ability to maneuver between West and East. In the Indian expert community, voices are heard saying that BRICS was always conceived as an economic alternative, not as a military alliance. However, diplomatic sources indicate that if China and Russia act as a united front, India is unlikely to block Venezuela's accession. The risk of being isolated within the bloc is too great. For Venezuela itself, joining BRICS opens a new stage. The country's economy, devastated by sanctions, hyperinflation, and the collapse of oil production, is getting a chance at revival. China is already preparing an investment package for Venezuela's energy sector, including modernization of oil refineries and joint projects in renewable energy. Russia, in turn, can offer Caracas military technologies and support in the field of cybersecurity. Thus, Maduro acquires a survival tool that until recently seemed impossible. Behind him stand two states capable of covering many of the country's needs while bypassing U.S. sanctions. The military perspective looks no less alarming. According to Jane's Defense Weekly sources, Russia is considering the possibility of conducting joint exercises with the Venezuelan army in the coming months. In Caracas, the option of deploying Russian long-range aircraft and anti-ship missile systems on the coast is being seriously discussed. For Donald Trump, this is a test of historic proportions. If he retreats, it will look like a concession to China and Russia right in the backyard of America. If he goes for escalation, he risks being drawn into a conflict where the United States has no guarantee of a quick victory. As Foreign Policy notes, the current crisis could become the defining factor of Trump's presidency. Either he demonstrates the ability to maintain U.S. global leadership, or he goes down in history as the leader under whom the real weakening of American hegemony began. And this is the essence of what is happening. China and Russia are using Venezuela not only as a strategic partner, but also as a symbol of the end of the unipolar world. And now each day that Chinese and Russian ships approach the shores of Latin America serves as a reminder that the sphere of U.S. influence is no longer untouchable.